The Senate has released new details in regard to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, a much smaller bill compared to what is proposed in the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. The reconciliation bill, of course, includes everything that we'd like to see funded, including funding for childcare, elder care, climate action, and the like. Now, this 2,700-page bipartisan bill does include some funding for physical infrastructure that's incredibly important, but it does have some giant red flags. The number one red flag, of course, being what we've talked about on the show before, asset recycling. And that's something that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez spoke about during a conversation with Jake Tapper over the weekend. Let's watch.
I want to be clear that the investments in the bipartisan bill are not all, candy land. There are some of these quote unquote pay-fors that are very alarming that we need to see the language on. For example, some of the language around privatizing public infrastructure, putting toll roads, leasing public infrastructure to private entities are very concerning and should be concerning to every American. So we really need to see that language and see what's put in there until it reaches, when it reaches the House. Bipartisan doesn't always mean that it's in the interest of the public good, frankly. Sometimes there's a lot of corporate lobbyist giveaways in some of these bills.
And she's right about that. As I mentioned, this bill as it stands right now is 2,700 pages long. We don't have too many details because you have to sit down and read every single detail of how that funding is appropriated. And more importantly, there's gonna be $579 billion in new spending. And when they talk about the pay-fors, because overall this is supposed to be a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal, they're talking about privatizing public infrastructure, which means that private companies will manage and control our infrastructure and implement various tolls and fees on the American people who need to use that infrastructure to go to and from work or to do anything, to travel, to get from one place to the other. And so I think that AOC is right in raising alarm on that issue. It's frustrating to see Democratic lawmakers celebrate this as if this is a giant victory just because it's being done in a bipartisan way. You can have bipartisan legislation that's completely disastrous for the American people. So why don't we just wait and see what's actually going to be in the final version of this bill, but more importantly, see whether there's gonna be enough of a fight to ensure the passage of the reconciliation version of the bill, which is of course far better.
Okay, what AOC did there was so important because again, you've gotta call out what's actually happening here. And there's, as we've explained many times now, there's two versions of this bill. There's the so-called bipartisan version that we're talking about here that has less provisions for climate change relief, less provisions for creating jobs, and we can go on and on. Now, there are parts of that bill that are good, and because of the pressure that progressives put on, they actually did take out the part about toll roads and all the things that Anna was telling you about that we were deeply concerned about. By the way, when progressives threaten to withhold their vote, hey, look at that. You get leverage and you get results. So the worst parts of that bipartisan bill appear to have been removed because of the pressure that AOC and others put on. So send her a thank you note. Now, having said that, we still believe that they should vote on the larger bill in the House first, because if they vote on the so-called bipartisan version of it, I guarantee you that's the only thing that'll pass. In fact, not just Democratic leadership, but the media now is gearing up to put pressure on progressives and everyone else to bow their heads and only pass the smaller version of the bill, the one that the Republicans agreed to, okay? Now, why do I say that? Now, you might think that this is subtle, and I'm gonna read you some of the things from just one of the articles that I read on this, but I see it throughout all the articles, and I saw them do this numerous times, especially on the Dodd-Frank financial reform bill. Okay, so first of all, the Washington Post explains declares in its headline that this is a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. Only later in the article do they clarify, well, it's not really a trillion. They're repurposing about half of that from the COVID relief bill that already passed. So it's actually only 550 billion. Okay, 550 billion is not a bad number. Okay, in the context of the trillions that we're talking about for infrastructure, it's actually relatively small. But at least be honest about what the number is, because they already passed the other portions. Claiming they're repassing it is totally pointless. It just gives them extra publicity for no reason, okay? Now, they describe it this way, second paragraph. The package arrives after weeks of haggling among a bipartisan bloc of lawmakers who muscled through late night fights and near collapses to transform their initial blueprint into a roughly $2,700 page piece of legislation. The fate of their labors now rests in the Senate. You see how it makes them sound like heroes? They're bipartisan and they fought so hard, and now all their hard work goes to the Senate, and let's see if something good can be made of it. These heroes. Third paragraph. Virtually no part of the US economy is untouched by the plan chiefly put together by Senators Rob Portman and Kyrsten Sinema. In other words, this is comprehensive and historic and unprecedented. It's exactly what they did with Dodd-Frank. And mind you, how did we find out Dodd-Frank was so weak? Because 1 out of 10 or 20 articles would tell you the truth. Paul Volcker wants his name removed from the bill because it's so weak and it's not going to get any real reform done. They bury that in the middle of the newspaper out of 1 out of 10 or so articles, right? But 9 out of 10 articles are on the front page. Historic financial reform. Obama holds Wall Street accountable. That just isn't true. And we know that because of other articles they have explaining that it isn't true when they actually get to the details. So what they're framing here is the bipartisan people are the heroes.
Right.
And if you don't pass this heroic thing, oh, you are against any action at all. No, but wait a minute. Progressives want more action, bigger action. No, so by the way, as always with our predictions here, you'll get to see it with your own eyes. We told you that they wouldn't do $15 minimum wage. They all said they would. We told you they were liars and we were right. And everyone else in national media was wrong. You saw it with your own eyes. Now we're telling you they're going to try to jam this bipartisan bill through, and the media is going to glorify it because they are the corporate media working with corporate Republicans and corporate Democrats, okay? Informally so, there's no memo written, but that invisible hand works really well. Now, finally, that is why AOC also calling out in that CNN appearance and saying bipartisan isn't necessarily good. It depends on what are we agreeing to. Oh my God, it's the first time I've heard that logical point in decades on television, maybe in my entire life. We've made it on the Young Turks thousands of times.
Yeah.
Who cares if it's bipartisan? What's in it?
She nailed that interview. The entirety of that interview with Jake Tapper was pretty powerful, so definitely check it out. But I do want to give you a few of the, I guess, where the spending is gonna go so far. And remember, this is the bill as it stands today. It's gonna go through debates on the Senate floor. They're going to make amendments to it. So who knows what the final bill is going to be. But just looking at the preliminary numbers, it's already abundantly clear that it's not enough funding to improve our crumbling infrastructure, which has not received the robust investment from the federal government that's necessary to keep the bridges from, let's say, collapsing, right? We just experienced bridges collapsing recently, which we reported on this show. Now, senators also said that the measure calls for $66 billion targeting passenger railways, which the White House says is the largest such investment since the creation of Amtrak nearly a half century ago. One thing I want to note is the reason why Republicans are on board in funding some of the physical infrastructure is because corporations need that physical infrastructure. You think it's just like random private American citizens who need infrastructure? No, if you want commerce to run smoothly in this country, you need to have a functioning infrastructure in order to be able to do that. So there are corporate, like the US Chamber of Commerce is totally on board for the bipartisan version of this bill because they get to benefit from it. They don't care about the American people getting to benefit from it. They want to make sure that federal money is used to improve infrastructure for their business purposes. Lawmakers also plan to set aside $55 billion to improve the country's drinking water. Oh, are they not merciful? Finally, including a program that seeks to replace every lead pipe in America. This is a good thing, of course. There's an additional $65 billion to expand broadband internet access nationwide and ensure those who do not or do have connectivity can afford their monthly payments. And Senate lawmakers are pursuing additional sums to upgrade key commercial hubs, including potentially $25 billion for repairs at major airports.
Now, Anna, all of that is good to really good, right? So credit where credit is due. But now, if you notice, once they have the bipartisan agreement, mainstream media tells you it's wonderful and tells you all the great parts of the package, right? Now, will they do likewise for the $3.5 trillion bill that progressives want and Democrats claim that they want and will get? Because that version of the bill has all of that times 3 or 4. And then many other provisions that are also excellent and create potentially millions of jobs. So far we've had the $3.5 trillion version presented by the press as this thing that Democrats say that they want, but is it really realistic? I don't know how we're gonna pay for it. But now the pared down version of it, which again, if you just take into account new money, is 1/7 the size of the progressive / Democratic version, right? Well, on that one, they say since we have corporate Republicans and Democrats agreeing, it's wonderful. On the much larger one, the things that we told you are wonderful, when you make them even larger, are not as good. So that's gonna come soon, okay? But the bottom line on all of this, and go to tyt.com/petitions, because we want your help in pushing forward change, is in the Senate, they can vote in any order they like. But in the House, if they vote for the bipartisan one, the pared down one that we're telling you about, if they vote for that one first, we're screwed. You're never, ever, ever gonna get the larger one. I don't care what Nancy Pelosi says. I've seen her lie dozens of times in exactly situations like this. And then they'll say, there was nothing we could do. Josh Gottheimer voted against it. And so did 3 other corporate Democrats. Oh, golly gee, right? No, you passed the $3.5 trillion version first, then we could pass this version. And that's what the petition asks people to do. Not only show your support by signing it, but send it to legislators. And if you get them to say, yes, I agree with this, please let us know, because then you're effectuating change in a positive way. And then we could get that to the press. And then the press will go, oh no, now progressives are actually trying to do the right thing. So now they have power and they have leverage. And now we're gonna have to negotiate to see if we can get a larger deal. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.